The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Shutting Down the PowerShell Attack Motorway. I'm here today with Dan Petrillo, Product Marketing Manager here at Cybereason. And today he's going to take us through an overview of PowerShell, why adversaries are choosing to use it, and how you can leverage behavioral analysis to combat these attacks. Just a little housekeeping before we dive in. So if you have any questions, please just use the chat box in the lower right-hand corner. We will try to get to your question. If we aren't able to get to your question, we will be sure to respond to you after the webinar. We'll just shoot you an email with the answer. And we'll also be sending a recording of this webinar to you the following day that you can refer back on. I believe that covers the housekeeping. So without further ado, Dan, why don't you take it away?
Great, thanks so much, Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned, today's webinar is going to be on shutting down the PowerShell attack motorway, and we appreciate you all joining. So first, if you've joined this webinar, you probably know what fileless malware is, but in a few words, fileless malware is a term for a malicious operation where malware doesn't actually touch the disk and is run entirely in memory. This makes it extremely effective against signature-based and even next-gen antivirus tools, and for this reason, it is becoming more and more prevalent. So our Security Operations Center has seen over 1/3 of attacks have been using fileless malware at some point in the attack lifecycle, and most of these utilize PowerShell. Now, PowerShell is a common tool that is used, comes pre-installed in all Windows operating systems. It is a management framework and a scripting engine that empowers IT departments to perform a wide array of administrative tasks. So these can be anything from getting a full report of USB devices installed in their environment to pushing massive configuration changes to the system. However, because it is so powerful, prevalent, and trusted, it has also become a favorite tool for executing malicious operations. In fact, PowerShell is used so much by attackers that they've built frameworks to leverage them as their fileless attack jumping point. There's many tools for this that exist, like PowerShell Empire, PowerSploit, Nishang, PS Attack, Metasploit, and others. And these tools allow adversaries to, they include scripts for code injection, credentials theft, keylogging, man-in-the-middle attacks, and other methods for delivering macros, DLLs, batch files, and HTA files. And what these do is they make complicated attacks much more trivial and easy to perform by adversaries. And they also have built-in tools like obfuscation tools and tools that allow them to bypass AMSI. So understanding why adversaries are using PowerShell so frequently also means understanding why it is the most common attack motorway, which are the first steps in learning how to prevent these attacks in your environment. So for that reason, I'd like to begin by talking about why PowerShell is the attack motorway. And we have a top 10 list for you. So coming in at number 10, PowerShell is relied upon. System administrators trust and use it daily. And as a result, many security tools trust it as well. Number 9, PowerShell is pervasive. Every modern version of Windows OS ships with PowerShell built in by default, so there's a good chance that an attacker will be able to find and utilize PowerShell in an environment. 8, PowerShell is stealthy. There are built-in commands that enable downloading code and running it in memory, and this is where the fileless aspect comes into play. Adversaries can execute commands on endpoints without dropping any files on disk, which allows it to elude antivirus mechanisms that rely on binary analysis and things like that. And this actually leads into number 7, which is PowerShell is untraceable. It generates very few artifacts. So not only can it attack without dropping anything on the disk, this means that forensics is very difficult. So it's difficult to trace the steps that the adversary took and understand exactly how they got into the environment, understand exactly how much they've infiltrated the network and the extent of the damage they may have caused. Number 6, PowerShell is powerful. It has remote access capabilities by default and allows you to do practically anything you want in the Windows environment. All you have to do is write a code or piece of code within PowerShell, and you can do anything from pull information to pushing config changes. And most importantly, these can be done remotely. So now the adversary has a really powerful tool that they can use discreetly on endpoints to do malicious activities. And we'll go more into what those malicious activities will be. 5, it is difficult to detect and easy to obfuscate. So particularly malicious commands, these scripting languages are notoriously flexible. Makes them easy, as I said before, easy to obfuscate. And also PowerShell's remote access capabilities include built-in encryption of traffic by default. So it's really hard to detect these types of attacks that leverage PowerShell. Number 4, it is easy to bypass application control tools, especially because PowerShell is whitelisted entirely. So many IT departments, because they trust and use this tool, they'll whitelist it, exclude it from a lot of their antivirus and cybersecurity mechanisms, which just creates a hole for attackers to leverage. Number 3, many PowerShell activities avoid sandbox tools. So many gateway sandboxes do not handle script-based malware well, so they cannot be used with PowerShell attacks, which is going to make things much more difficult on security operations teams, as you well know. 2, PowerShell is often overlooked by security professionals. So these guys are looking everywhere for malicious activity, but the one thing that often gets overlooked are tools that are used for non-malicious activity. And this kind of alludes to the idea that these attackers who use fileless malware are living off the land, right? They're not bringing in their own tools, they're using tools that already exist in the environment and tools that are overlooked by security operations centers. And finally, PowerShell has a growing community of malicious actors who have built entire frameworks to exploit PowerShell. So as I've shown before, there's a whole host of frameworks that adversaries can leverage, and this just makes it that much more easy to perform malicious activity in your environment. Even if some of the less technically advanced attackers are going to be able to perform commands that would normally be very difficult by leveraging the community of bad actors who are posting these frameworks and sharing them throughout the community. So now that we understand why this tool is so widely used by adversaries and why it's so difficult to block and why it's so difficult to trace and why it's so powerful, let's look at some of the ways that people rely or try to block PowerShell-based malicious activity right now. One is command line analysis, but command line analysis is easily bypassed. This often relies on signature-based detection. However, it is really common for adversaries to obfuscate their malicious commands with publicly available tools such as Veil, Magic Unicorn, Invoke Obfuscation, and there are others too, but this really makes it trivial for adversaries to obfuscate some of the commands they use that might have signatures that would be found by this command line analysis tool or any command line analysis blocking mechanisms. Another method that is commonly used is whitelisting, but that creates a lot of false positives. Whitelisting tools can be beneficial, but they're really labor intensive to set up. And it's really difficult to set them up properly such that they don't inhibit non-malicious operations and they don't leave any holes for adversaries. So as a result, there's going to be a lot of false positives, there's going to be a lot of ongoing maintenance, and also there ends up being holes that adversaries will find and will leverage to perform their malicious operations. AMSI, or Anti-Malware Scan Interface. You may know this, but it is a Windows 10 feature that gives AV vendors the ability to scan and block input before it is run by the scripting engine. Therefore, in-memory scripts are also analyzed. Unfortunately, the most common version of PowerShell, PowerShell version 2, is not supported. And additionally, there are several AMSI bypass techniques that have been published, and like I've been harping on, the community is publishing these frameworks and sharing them. One is Empire AMSI, and these are able to bypass AMSI. And then finally, adversaries are able to downgrade PowerShell to version 2, and therefore you might as well not have had AMSI in the first place because it is not supported. The final conventional method that I wanted to mention, and it may not even be a blocking method per se, is to disable PowerShell entirely. We've seen this being advised, and we've seen people have to resort to this, but this is really business unfriendly. As I mentioned before, PowerShell is a great tool. It's really beneficial. IT departments use PowerShell regularly for a whole host of commands. Like I said, for pooling information, for pushing configurations, you can do so much with it, and it really makes their lives easier. And in a lot of operations, a lot of environments, it's absolutely essential. So this is either a non-option, or it's going to really hinder business and make IT departments less efficient and less effective. So now that we understand, some of the ways that people may try to block PowerShell now, and understand that not all solutions are created equal, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Cyber Reason approach. So this diagram here kind of shows the whole Cyber Reason platform, all the possibilities within it that start with blocking known malware with signature analysis, layer that with unknown malware blocked by our proprietary NGAV machine learning engine. And then the one that we're focusing on today is the behavioral analysis that is used to block fileless malware. You'll see after that there's also behavioral analysis to block ransomware, and then our whole EDR platform. That all sits behind this. What we do with PowerShell is we block this malicious activity before it happens and before it can do any harm. So this is a prevention mechanism that leverages behavioral analysis with deep visibility into PowerShell. It does not rely on signatures, and so thus it can't be circumvented with obfuscation. It does not require maintenance or configuration like whitelisting tools. It doesn't rely on AMSI, so it works on more environments than just Windows 10, and it actually works on all versions of PowerShell. So it doesn't matter what version of PowerShell is being used, doesn't matter what obfuscation techniques are being used, doesn't matter what configuration went into this. This is going to be effective in your environment. So in order to show this, I want to show a few screenshots of what a PowerShell-based attack might look like in an environment that doesn't have Cyber Reason, and then a few attacks in an environment that does have Cyber Reason. So first here you see the administrator console for PowerShell, and here is an invoke Mimikatz command. So Mimikatz is a framework that can be used to steal credentials, and it will print them in clear text on the screen. This command here downloads and runs a PowerShell command, this script will run a PowerShell command that downloads and executes a Mimikatz script directly into memory. And here's what it looks like. Without PowerShell protection, even with regular antivirus mechanisms, this is able to run successfully because no binary is dropped on the disk, and therefore it is able to, the adversary is able to successfully get the credentials from the machine. Now, with Cybereason's PowerShell blocking capabilities enabled, when this command is run, it is blocked. And it doesn't matter that there were no files dumped on the screen. It's not relying on our signature detection. It's not even relying on our machine learning algorithm. This is a behavioral analysis algorithm that has deep visibility into PowerShell and is able to block these commands regardless. And to demonstrate that further, I want to show here is that same command but obfuscated. So there's no signatures here to pull. There's no way to use command line analysis, or command line analysis will be ineffective against this type of command. And when you see this run, once again, it is blocked by Cybereason's PowerShell protection. Now, another important thing to note is that it would be actually pretty trivial to block these commands if you just block PowerShell processes entirely. So here we see a very benign, just a get date command, and that is able to run successfully as well. So the point here being, we're not blocking all commands and we're not just looking at the command line. We have deep visibility into PowerShell and we are looking for malicious behavior itself, and we are preventing that from executing. Additionally, once a command is blocked, you can navigate to the malware alerts feed and you'll see it there. And with one click, you can pivot over to the EDR platform, where you can then investigate and find context around the attack. When they might have tried to use PowerShell, you can learn all the processes surrounding that, and then you can leverage that to inform the employees who might have allowed for this breach on better security practices, and you can further harden your environment to make sure that you would never be subject to that type of attack again. Now, I know this was just some screenshots in sequence, but we are more than happy to show a live demonstration of our advanced PowerShell blocking. So if you would like to see an actual demo, please reach out to sales@cybereason.com or wherever your contact may be, and we'll be happy to run through some demonstrations of live attack simulations and how our PowerShell protection can block those. And that is all we have for the brief webinar today. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you guys may have. I think Lauren mentioned that you can type them into the chat box, and she'll read them off to me as they come in.
Thanks, Dan. That was fantastic. So we actually do have a few questions. Let's see. So the first one we have here is, this person asked, doesn't PowerShell 5 have built-in security measures?
Okay, yes, absolutely. It does have built-in security measures, and they're quite good. However, there are a couple things to be wary of. One, it is not, they're not enabled by default. So I believe they have a few mechanisms, and they're all can be turned on in the configuration, but they're not turned on by default. But I think most importantly, we've seen adversaries be able to successfully downgrade the version of PowerShell to PowerShell 2, which just opens up the floor for them to perform their malicious activity. So one of the things about our PowerShell blocking is it works with all versions of PowerShell. It doesn't matter if you have those built-in capabilities or not, and it doesn't matter if the adversary takes the time to downgrade to PowerShell 2. Cybereason's behavioral analysis will block the malicious activity regardless of what version. But that is a great question, and if you can use PowerShell version 5, please do be sure to turn on those features because they are good features.
Great. Another question we have is beyond PowerShell, what else is your product doing to protect against other types of fileless malware?
That's a good question. And on my first slide, I said, 1/3 of attacks are using fileless malware at some point, and that most use PowerShell. And I said most because it is true, it's not all. So we began with PowerShell because it is the most common. And we do have insight into, we have detections on other fileless attacks that use WMI or some of those other mechanisms that they might use other than PowerShell. So with our product, you will be able to detect non-PowerShell based fileless attacks, and we are adding more fileless prevention mechanisms in the coming months. And I believe I said WMI, that is the next one that is going to come. But yes, right now we can only prevent PowerShell. Next, we'll be able to prevent WMI, but we can detect all types of fileless attacks.
Excellent. And next question is, someone asks, is this PowerShell capability a separate tool from the rest of your product?
Okay, yeah, I realize I probably brushed over that, but and maybe I made it sound like that's not the case, but it is absolutely part of our existing product. It uses the same agent that our NJV and EDR uses, and it is managed in the same console. It has the same UI. Yeah, I'll even add that I've kind of mentioned it before, but if an attack is blocked with PowerShell, you can easily pivot over to the EDR with one interface and get more context around the attack. So to answer your question, no, it's not a separate tool. It uses the same agent, and it is part of our NGAV. It's actually a piece of our next-gen antivirus.
Excellent. And so actually I've been a little short on time, so just last question here. This person asked, does your PowerShell blocking impact performance or stability?
Okay, no, it doesn't, and that's a good question as well. Our technology is unique in that we are very attacker-oriented. A lot of our analysts, a lot of our engineers are ex-hackers, and they keep up with the latest trends, so they know exactly what to look for. So when they write collections, when they talk about visibility into a product, they're looking for very specific activity, only malicious activity. They're not casting a wide net, so to speak. So this means we're very pointed in our methods, and our interactions with the operating system are minimal. So they'll neither hinder performance or stability as you might think based on the fact that we do have such deep visibility. And in fact, I was talking about this with one of our engineers the other day. Our impact is actually slower than a lot of standard AV systems. And I guess I got to be brief here, but it has to do with the fact that our unique approach and visibility leverages our purpose-built architecture. And if you want to learn more about that, that's a conversation for another day. But to answer your question, no, this will not have an impact on performance or stability.
Awesome. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Dan, thank you so much. Very, very informative. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Just a reminder that if we did not get to your question, we will answer it in the next day or so via email. And we will also tomorrow be sending you a follow-up email with the recording. So you'll be able to refer back to it whenever you want. And as Dan said, if you do have any questions about Cybereason's PowerShell blocking capabilities or just Cybereason in general, you can reach out to sales@cybereason.com, or you can just reply to the email that we'll send you tomorrow with the recording. I think that about does it. Dan, thank you again. And everyone else, thank you. And we'll hopefully see you on our next webinar.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thanks.